Attention, citizens. It's time for Super Pulp Science.
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. I am absent, my long-suffering co-host today, and my trusty producer is nowhere to be found, so I'm going it alone into a scary place. I have a guest today, J.H. Moncrieff, who has joined us today on the podcast. J.H., thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
I hope so. Now, if I do a cursory search of your name, the first thing that I find is this huge long list of books, and most notably, in 2021, 3 books out in the same year: a Sasquatch book, a ghost book. Number one, congratulations on being so prolific. Number two, how come everything that you write is described in the following way? Ray Bradbury meets Stephen King, intrigue, murder, family secrets, monsters, terror, suspense. Chuck Wendig said that you were a bold new voice in horror and supernatural suspense. I feel a little nervous asking you questions because I'm afraid that after all these years, I'll learn the real answers on how to do some of this stuff. Why don't you share with the dear listener a little bit who you are and what you like to write and why?
Well, I like to say I'm not creepy. I just write that way. I'm actually really not that dark, but my work is. And where that comes from, I guess, is I've always been fascinated by that stuff since I was really small. I have no idea why. I guess because when we were kids, it was taboo, right? It's like, oh, don't read the scary story, you'll get nightmares. So as soon as someone says, don't read this, I wanted to read it. So that was part of it. I have a mother who was very into true crime, which I believe is like the most horrific stuff you can get out there. There's still some true crime stuff I really struggle with. So there's that influence. And then when I was in high school, I had a writing teacher who hated what he called Disney endings. He didn't want a happy ending. And I found the easiest way to give him what he wanted and get a good mark was to write horror, because horror doesn't have to have a happy ending. There's never a guarantee about what's going to happen to your protagonist. So I think that's what really started to cement that tendency. But even when I try to write a romance, someone's decapitated very early on. So I've just learned that I can't really force. I love reading lighter things. I love reading like cozy mysteries. I love reading travel memoirs. But when it comes to my own work, I tend to be on the dark side, for better or for worse.
I can relate to that, not only as a writer, but also as an illustrator. I was always that kid. I was explaining to my own children recently that around grade 4 or 5, I discovered the red pen. And so I would always draw these monsters and these horrific scenes. And once I realized in black and white that you could just add one color, I remember at one point a teacher looking through my drawing book, and then I was immediately in the counselor's office, like something must be up. What is going on? But for me, it was simply that a little bit of claret and everyone felt something. Everyone withdrew or said, ooh, or laughed, or right. The taboo excited them in a way that obviously got me more attention as a kid in grade 4. And so what do you keep doing? Right.
Absolutely. And everyone seems to love scary stories. Like even the people who say they don't love scary stories, it's like if you start talking to them about an urban legend or about an unsolved mystery or, Twilight Zone, Tales of the Dark Side, all those really good shows, there'll be that spark, right? People like to talk about that stuff, I find.
So, well, I think you gave us the best segue there. I happen to know, I have it on good authority, that you spent the night in a haunted house, and the result was a pretty scary novel also. Why don't you tell us about that? It's down the Vert House here in Winnipeg, as I understand it. I've been there, and I just want to paint one picture for the dear listener, which is the last time we went there, the top floor had all of these beautiful, they at a distance looked like paintings, but you realize that they're in fact these sort of dioramas made out of the hair of the dead. So you went and stayed in this place overnight. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was the coolest experience. I'll never, ever be able to thank those people enough for the access they gave us. So I used to work in a museum, right? And everything's behind bars and glass, and like you can't touch anything. Delaware, they took down all the ropes and let us go wherever we wanted to, which just blew my mind. And then they left. There was like one person sleeping in that upstairs room with the creepy hair wreaths that you mentioned. There was one person sleeping there, but they just left these writers unattended. They didn't know us. So I was blown away by that.
So this initiative to invite writers to stay overnight in a historically haunted house, do you know how that started? And I know they're continuing it to this day as a tradition. So
I'm so jealous. It was started by Thin Air. As far as I know, the Thin Air Writers Festival here in Winnipeg. They wanted to recreate, I think, I'll probably butcher the pronunciation, but Phantasmagoriana. How do you say that? Phantasmagoriana or something?
Phasmagoria.
Yes, thank you. I cannot pronounce that for the life of me. So they want to recreate that night where Mary Shelley stayed up with her friends and her husband.
Oh,
and
that makes so much sense. Yeah.
Frankenstein. Although I don't think they were in a haunted house, but maybe every place there was haunted at that time. So they came up with this idea with Downlevert. Obviously, Downlevert was very keen to do it, where they bring in 4 dark fiction writers every year and leave them to their own devices, with the idea being that we write a story for a chapbook based on our experiences of that night. And when I did it, we had our first reading and we stayed overnight there on Friday the 13th in September.
Of course. That's so perfect.
Right. And then the reading of our final story was on Halloween. So the dates worked out really, really well. I don't think the dates will work out that well again for a long time. But when we did our first initial reading on September 13th, and afterwards we went upstairs to record a podcast. And right after the podcast, one of the authors, Dave Demchuk, said, okay, well, where does everyone want to write? And right away I said Jack's room. And then I, because I'm Canadian, I went, if that's okay with everyone, if no one else wants it. But I just knew right away. I'd heard Jack had died in that room. He was the son. I believe he was early or maybe late teens when he died of diabetes in that room. So I knew if something was going to happen, it was probably going to be in Jack's room. I was right. And as usual, I was the only one of the 4 that had anything supernatural happen.
Okay. I didn't know if something wicked that way came or not.
Oh, yes. Did you want me to go into that?
Well, I don't see how I could not, for the dear listener's sake, at least inquire.
Well, if I were going to haunt anybody, this would certainly be the house I'd do it in.
Who closed the door?
Downlevert were very, very nice, and they provided these little plastic table and chairs for us in all these different rooms that we could move, like they were light enough that you could move them around if you want to write. And they were very nice to do that, but they were horrible to sit in. No shade, but they were horrible to sit on. So like within minutes, my back was killing me. So I took my laptop and I sat beside, like there's this little hallway that goes into Jack's room, and there's a closet. And then just slightly past the closet, there is a door to leave his room, right? So I sat with my back against the wall by the closet, and I was writing away or trying to write. And then for some reason, I was compelled to get up and look out the window. To this day, I have no idea why I did that. But I got up, and when I was almost to the window, bam! And I turned, and the closet door had flown open right into my laptop, and it was as loud as a gunshot. Like it was so loud, it was so violent. And the other writers who were like all over in different parts of this huge house, they all heard it and just thought someone had dropped something. But right away I turned and I went and I looked in the closet, because this wasn't my first rodeo. So I went and looked in the closet. There was nothing in the closet. I tried to have it so like the door would just barely closed to see if I could do it again, but you couldn't. The door was either all the way open or all the way shut. You couldn't, if you had it like just barely latched, it would immediately open. So then I tried like bouncing on the floor on the way to the window and back to see if it, maybe there was something in the floor that would
Your
make
first
the door.
thought is, I shifted the weight. It's an old house. Maybe I shifted the
Yes.
floorboard. Yes. Okay.
I'd seen a documentary where people went to Amityville.
Mhm.
And you know, there's that scene where the window slams down on the boy's fingers.
Yeah.
They found that if they stepped on the floor in a certain spot, the window moved up and down, which is terrible.
I have a window in my house that if I lean heavy on one side of the jamb, like the frame, the window will loosen and drop also. Yeah.
Oh, creepy.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe that's what this is, and I couldn't recreate it. And by now the other writers have found their way to me and found out what happened. And I think everybody was a little bit envious, right? That they hadn't. So they didn't want to leave the room, and they were jumping on the floor and going back and forth and everything, and nothing. We couldn't make it happen again. Thankfully, my laptop was okay. And so what ended up happening is I just stayed in the room after that. They did remark though that it was colder in that room than anywhere else in the house. And as I stayed there till I think 4 a.m. trying to write. And as I stayed, it got colder and colder and colder until like I had my winter coat and a big like blanket wrapped around me. And I was just, by the end, my fingers were frozen and I had to leave that room, but nothing else happened other than that, the closet door flying open. But I still, we couldn't recreate it. And then the next day at breakfast, the executive director came back and I asked him, have you ever had any problems with that closet? And he went, no.
You hadn't discussed that previously for like what kind of things sometimes happen or reportedly happen in the house? Nothing like that?
They'd mentioned things like photographs in Jack's rooms didn't turn out, like they'd be blurry all of a sudden and stuff like that. But I mean, that can be anything, right? That could be like lack of light, too fast a shutter speed, a bad photographer, like that can be all sorts of things. So that was mentioned. But when I asked about the closet, he got this weird look on his face. He went, no. I'm like, so it's never like flown open? He's like, no. And he said they use it for storage, but they don't ever go in there. And when I went in there, there was like nothing in there. And it was almost like it was those grand old closets, right? Where it's almost like a room, but there was nothing in there.
Or was there?
Or was there? It was so violent. Like the way that door flew open was just, it was so loud. But I never felt like, I didn't feel anger there. I didn't feel any aggressive bad feeling there. Like I didn't feel like someone there wanted me out or anything. It was more like a, hey, hi. So finally I got an idea for a story, thank goodness, because that's not my ideal environment to write in with that pressure where, oh, we're, here's a group of people, you're going to write a story tonight, stat. Like that's not really my ideal.
This story that you then put in the chapbook, and for the dear listener, chapbook is like a collection of short stories, not like a full published manuscript, kind of like a short run thing that you'll create for a special occasion or as an art installation or as a way to get work into a select number of people's hands. But you didn't let it stop there. If I've got my notes right, that became a novel called The Restoration. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. I got really lucky. While I was writing the story, I didn't want to end it. And of course, being a chapbook, we had a very limited amount of space. So I did my best with the ending, but I wasn't happy with it because the story wanted more. So I had already worked with that publishing company.
Wouldn't be contained in a small space, just the size of a closet. It wanted more room.
It definitely did. So I contacted my publisher and pitched the story to it. And this is to this day, the first time I've been paid for work without writing a single word. So that was fun.
Just the pitch, you got paid on the pitch.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't it delicious? The greatest feeling.
It is. I haven't had that happen before. So that was, I mean, it was pressure. Mm-hmm. Now I had to write the thing. Mm-hmm. Usually I've written the thing before I get paid. But it was good.
Novel writing and working in the comic space. I mean, I work in novels and in comics and in other fields, but not comics. It's pretty common to get paid for the idea and then execute the idea. To be given that confidence, I think partly is because there's only so much can go wrong in a comic. if they know the artist attached and they know the writer attached, there's only so many words to begin with. And if the artist's strong, it's going to come together. So the publisher is not risking as much as with a novel where they're trusting the entire contents to your imagination. Can we unpack that expectation and pressure? Because I think that is a unique experience for a writer. How did you approach, okay, I gave them a good idea and now I have to deliver?
Well, I did what almost any good writer would do. I procrastinated until about a month before. And then I did this thing I call the Dan Brown Project. So if I assume your listeners know Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code, I watched his masterclass, and he has this bizarre process where he gets up at 4 a.m. and he writes until 11 a.m. And that's his process. And I just thought, that's brilliant, because you'd have your entire day done by the time most people are just getting started. This is perfect. So that's what I did. And so I managed to write a 70,000 word book in 2 weeks, just because I was writing, consistently every day, 7 hours a day. Although I modified his plan, and I did 5 hours a day and then 2 hours of marketing. Because to me, 7 hours of writing straight is a lot.
Yeah, it's almost too much, right?
I agree.
Returns at a certain point.
Exactly.
For me, anyway. I'm not as.
So in 2 weeks, I had the novel, which was great because I think it was due the next month and I hadn't started. So yeah, it worked out well. Obviously, then I went through the editing process, and with Flame Tree, it's very extensive. My editor there, Don DeAria, is a bit of a legend in the horror industry, which I didn't know when I started working with him. I'm very glad I didn't know, because I just
didn't know. You didn't know when you started.
No, I didn't. And then podcasters started interviewing me, and they first start with, "What's Don DeAria like? What does he like to work with? What
Like, I don't know. I haven't finished the book yet. I have another week."
What cereal does he eat? Well, when I first started working with him, I won a call. They had an open call out, and I won it, and that's why I started working with him. But this story, I hadn't started, but I'd worked with Don enough, and he'd worked with me enough, I guess, that he trusted that this was just, I don't even think he gave it another thought. They paid me, and then yes, the book would materialize when it was supposed to, and I don't think he was worried about it. But yeah, I definitely put it off way longer than I should have, but that unfortunately is a tendency with me sometimes.
So if any of you decide not to stay for the party, you must let me know before midnight. Of course, if you leave, I shan't be able to pay you anything.
I want to ask you about your drafting process. When I write a first draft, the first, like what I would call to myself, but to no other professional writer, a first draft is an absolute shambling mess. It is just like a disgorged, unrealized thing. But now it's in front of me, and I can start to polish it up, clean it up, and see, is it a baby or a monster? Wash the goo off. How are your drafts? Do they come out of you pretty solid, pretty firm, or do you have to do a lot of polishing?
My first drafts now come out pretty solid. They didn't used to. I have this tendency where I always want to set up where the character was and their lives and everything. And then the inciting incident happens, and then it gets cool. And I've since learned to just take out all that stuff at the beginning and start where it gets interesting. But that took me a while. Like that took people like saying, okay, you've got 2 different books here, 100,000 words of this has to go. So I went through that.
Let's not step over that. Let's not leap forward. Like, so many of us, I've been there too, thrown away entire, 80,000, 150,000, just because they're garbage. But I don't want to talk about it usually. So I just say, yeah, I wrote one, but I don't, I was done with it. But let's not do that. Let's, you and I, unpack that notion that somebody has told you, if you just get to the good part, people would read this. Right? How was that process for you of accepting that you just gotta start at the good part?
Honestly, that was what she said was, you have 2 different books here. These pieces do not belong. You can just lift the first part of your book right out. And this was Hallie Ephron that told me that. I don't know if your readers will be familiar with her, but she's the sister of Nora Ephron. and she's a big mystery writer. So one would think she knew what she was talking about. I thought she was wrong. I think I left that. I think I cried at first, not in front of her, although she did make people cry. She was a very like blunt. She was doing blue pencils at a conference, and she was a lot more blunt than most of the writers were. And I think I cried. I was very angry. I was like, she doesn't, I told my first reaction was like, oh, she's right. Oh my God, like half my book is wrong. And my writers are like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. You're an amazing writer. Like, what does she know? She's just a best-selling novelist. What does she know? And then you get kind of like, yeah, what does she know? She don't. And it took me seriously, probably another several years before I went, shit, she's right.
Yeah. It's hard. And just to back up a shade to the blue pencil sessions, some blue pencil sessions are very encouraging and wonderful, and the editors therein will just circle all the good parts, right? They kind of do like 2 stars in a wish mode. And other blue pencil sessions I've seen or heard tell of are more like scissors, red pens, and tears in a cup kind of. So what advice would you give to a person who is going to a literary convention or seeking out a blue pencil? How can they prepare themselves or their manuscript for the hard facts that might be coming?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because I'm also a developmental editor, and I get clients who are ready to be edited, and I get clients who are not ready to be edited. And it's the same thing with the blue pencil. I guess what I'd say is, if someone just tells you it's good, they are not your friend. They're not doing you any favors, because even if your work is good, whatever good is,
whatever good means,
even if your work is good, there's always something that can make it better. And you're there ostensibly with professionals in the industry, or who are at a higher rung on that ladder than you, who are helping you, who want to help you. They're not there, like, I know I've been there, it's hard work. They're not there for money, trust me. And they're not there for any clout or like any thrill it gives them to tear other writers down. And they're not there because they want to steal your ideas. That's another fear I've heard.
Oh, I hear it constantly.
Yeah, they're just there because they really genuinely want to help other writers. They remember what it was like, and maybe no one was honest with them. And now they want to be honest and help you out. So actually people like Hallie Efron, as much as I just resented the hell out of her at the time, I was able to, that same conference had me back as their success story years later. And she was still there presenting. And I went up to, and she's like, oh, hello. And, introduced herself to me. And I was like, actually, we've met before. And she said, really? I said, yeah, you eviscerated me on a blue pencil. Critique, and her face just fell, she looked horrified, and I'm like, oh no, it was okay, you were right, you were totally right, I sold that book for all this money, blah blah blah. And just like you could tell she was just like, oh.
Here I stand, right? I went through the fire. When I was first starting out, Steven Erikson kicked me down the stairs a little bit, Selima Nawaz kicked me down, Laverne Kaczynski, for the comic side. You do need people to just be like, you're not ready, and push you down.
Yes.
Right? And they're not doing it to be mean. I asked them. Right.
Yeah. And you can tell sometimes when writers are just like, oh, that's great. I've been in writing groups like that where, people will say that to everybody. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, yes. So we want more. And it's like, this is crap. And I think when you tell, and as an editor, it's really hard because I think I'm a nice person, but I have to be frank with these people, right? I can't just say like, they're not paying me to say like, oh, your book is wonderful. That's what their mom is for, right? Ideally, I'm there to say like, you're using this crutch too much. Your character, there's no plot. What is the story about? What genre is this? It's not obvious, questions like that. And if I just say, oh, this is lovely, I'm not doing them any favors.
Okay, do me a favor. Here's a favor. Now, Dat Lao Pass, am I saying that right? This is a Sasquatch book, or kind of like there's a mystery involved around this, which is based on real life events. Let me just look. Return, to Dat Lao Pass. They made a movie about this. They made a documentary about this event. I've seen all kinds of conspiracy theories about this event. But as far as I know, there's only one real novel about this event, and it seems to be yours. So why don't you, yeah, why don't you tell us about this one?
Okay, and I always ask people when they ask me this, do you want the more sanitized version, or do you want the realistic, actual, real, true version?
Well, I want the truth, but I don't know if I can take it, just like most people.
Oh, you can take it. It's just so mercenary. So for that one, I have a very good publisher, Severed Press. They primarily publish creature books. So creature horror, kaiju, lost lands, that sort of thing.
Some mech adventures in there too, I have to say.
Yeah, and they do really well with it. Like, that's one thing I can say about them. That editor knows his audience like nobody else. Like, he just has the pulse of his audience. So we were talking about a new book, and I gave him two ideas. I said, did you want me to talk about Dyatlov? Or I was thinking, you know, about people going back there to reinvestigate the mystery, or we could do this other thing. And I can't even remember what the other suggestion was, but he said Dyatlov. And I said, okay, so there's, you know, here's the main conspiracies about Dyatlov. Which one do you want me to go with? And he's like, Yetis. Yetis do well for us. I'm like, Yetis it is. And that's nothing I ever would have necessarily written about, because if it were up to me, I would have gone the whole government conspiracy route, which I think is more probable. More
plausible, and maybe more media as a writer, you'd think at first, right?
Yeah, and scarier maybe.
Yeah.
But I did mess, as I always do, with the format. They're not typical Yetis. But I don't want to spoil too much. But yeah, so I got through that book. It was a very, very hard book to write, because you're sort of, you know, as a writer, you're immersing yourself in that setting. And, you know, it's cold. It's the Ural Mountains in Russia. It's very, you know, your team's getting picked off one by one. You can't get out of there. Like, it would just, it was not a fun book by any means to write. But it was the only book I think I've ever written where I knew the ending before I finished it. And I just thought, oh, this is the best ending I'm ever going to write.
Pity you didn't know when you started your game of murder that I was playing too.
Then the reviewers got a hold of it, and some people loved it and other people just hated the ending. So if I ever get bad feedback about that novel, it's the ending.
See, that's, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that's how you know it's good.
Really?
Yes. People have to be divided. I don't trust a book that has unanimous praise. I trust a book where some people love it and some people despise it. And then I know there's something in it that's going to excite me and put me on one side or the other. That's the journey I want to go on. When a book has unanimous praise, okay, right? It has all the sun on it now. I'll go look for the dark spots somewhere else.
Exactly. And Severed, you're never going to get a book that has unanimous praise, because there is like a fierce audience of angry dude bros that read those books. And especially in that book, it has a very strong female protagonist. So I got comments like, clearly written by a feminist, only got to 55%, you know, stuff like that. So I just kind of laugh and go,
you can also judge who is saying what bad thing, and you can take it as a compliment sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, I actually use that review as an example in writing courses. I love that bad review. It's like, okay, good, I can write strong females now. Good, thank you for letting me know.
It's the litmus test, right? You got far enough up the dude bro litmus test to really agitate them, to cause an itch. Right.
But I have to say that now, years later, after writing that book, I kind of regret that I did.
You regret that you wrote it?
Yes.
Interesting.
Because, and I mean, the book is dedicated to the deceased ski hikers who died in Dyatlov Pass, but, and I'm getting all emotional now, I think when I wrote it, I wasn't really thinking enough about them and what it had, like just the legacy, their families, and how much it would hurt. Like if I'd lost my family member in this horrible way and everybody just treated it as this big, like riveting, titillating, unsolved mystery. And now some writer writes a book about it where, people are getting murdered left, right, and center, and that, like, how I would feel, right? I would feel it was exploitative. I would feel, like it was just very crass, and that's probably a nice way of putting it. So now I regret that. I don't think I would do that again.
So I had a two similar experiences. One that where I just abandoned a draft when somebody reminded me. I was writing this like an alternate history Jack the Ripper story.
Ooh.
And then, and then maybe it pointed at some Spring-Heeled Jack, and it pointed at some Dracula, like it pointed at fictional events. And a good friend, a smart writer, said, this is a lived experience. Jack the Ripper is not a made-up thing. People really did die. And it's really, the young writer in me is like, oh, right. Yeah. That, these are real people. Right. This is something I should handle. And I abandoned that draft. And much later, and so if it's in fiction, there are terrible things that happen in my stories to characters that do not deserve it, but they never existed. And when I was working on a graphic novel with David Alexander Robertson, we were working on a book called Will I See with singer-songwriter Isque, and it was based around the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. They invited me to lend my visual voice while they put in the words. And so I was illustrating this, and I found it very difficult to represent the monster of the lived experience in that book. Much more difficult. I can draw horrible things all day long if everyone's made up, but knowing that these are, representative of real things, it haunted me, is maybe the right word, later, in a way I wasn't quite ready. I knew it, I had prepared for it, and I was sort of trying to honor it as I did it, but even still, I have a hard time looking at that book and looking through it. So,
I totally get that.
Yeah. So then let's jump to completely made up stuff. You've got 3 books out, or you had 3 books out in 2021, if I'm getting that right. Yeah, let me see this here. So we had Oracle of Ghosts, we had Book of the Dead, we had Shadow of the Sasquatch. Of those, are any of them based on a lived experience?
No, they're not.
Okay, so they're safe for us to discuss.
Yes, all of my ghostwriters books, and Oracle of Ghosts is the 7th of them. They all pull on horrible things that have happened to people in other countries, with the idea being that, those experiences we don't learn from return to haunt us, or the past returns to haunt us, except literally haunt us in the form of a ghost of some kind. So there's always some truth to those books, but Oracle is a little more, the Oracle touches a bit more on the destruction of the environment, which is true, but it's not, I'm not taking, a group of people who actually died in a horrible way and basing a story around that.
Yeah, much more difficult task to accomplish. So when you're writing, you told me before we started recording that you tend to pants, right by the seat of your pants. You just go for it. I find that exciting, because I also do that for the most part, and so it's nice to meet another one. I tend to plot my ending so I kind of know where I'm trying to get to. But one thing that I've found increasingly difficult to pants, and so I'd like to ask you for some advice here. Characters that are compelling. I find myself, I can tip toward tropes and cliche if I'm writing by the seat of my pants and I'm trying to make people, as opposed to if I think about them long enough and I plan it, I can make them a little bit more human and real. How do you approach that?
I warned you this is weird. So what happens with me is, I honestly, and I swear on everything, I swear on this cat that this is true, is that I don't feel like I create anything. So what I'll do, or what I used to do back in the day when I didn't have deadlines for books and I didn't have a series that, people are expecting the next book, I would just come up with a what if idea. Some what if would pop in my head. Like, what if a group of podcasters went up to Dyatlov now to investigate what happened? What if? And then I'll give it, like, say, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, and this character will show up in my head and start talking to me. And then my job is to write down what they say as fast as I can so I don't lose them.
Is it conversational in your mind, or is it an
Yes.
actual narrative?
It's conversation. It's kind of like, hey, my name's Jackson. Let me tell you what happened to me. Okay. So the danger becomes if I ever drop the conversation for too long, like if I take a big break from writing, which has been known to happen, then it's almost like if you're talking to someone on the phone and you leave the phone too long and they'll hang up, right? So then it's hard to get it back. But if I keep going and I just trust what they're saying, they will take me all the way through, and there'll be all these little details that are put in throughout the book where I was like, that's really boring. Why is that in there? Is that necessary? And I just have to trust it. And it all, by the end, I'm like, oh, that's what that was for.
So the dear listener cannot see, I'm grinning ear to ear, because one of the things that I find when I'm stuck, I don't know what happens next. I borrowed it from the idea of the Socratic method, where you have an argument with yourself. And so what I'll do is I'll write as if I'm talking to future me, and I will ask, what is the book about?
Oh, cool. That's a neat idea.
And I will have a conversation with myself about what the book was about, as if the person I'm talking to knows all the answers that I wish I knew.
That's so cool.
And I find it tricks my brain into filling in. Like, I will literally have a conversation with myself that becomes, well, do you know that part near the end where, you know, the dad is moving through the, and like, I haven't written that part yet. I don't know. I'm talking to myself as myself, right? Like someone making up a lie about a book, but then the lie becomes the book because I'm taking notes, right? So I like this idea. I wonder what it is that's going on in us where the other side of our mind has the answers if we just ask it.
I've always thought the only explanation I can give, like if we were back in a different time, I think people would blame it on muses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The only explanation I've ever been able to come up with is just my subconscious has already written the book, and I just need to keep going and trust it and tap into it, because I always get to a point, every single book, and I've written, I think, 24. And I still get to the middle of the book and freak out that, oh my God, I don't, you know, I'm almost at like 50,000 words and I don't know how this is going to end. And then I remember I never know how this is going to end. So with the exception of Return to Dyatlov, where that one did come to me a little earlier, but other than that, it's actually really good for me not to know, because if I write a mystery and I have like one of my mysteries that's out, I didn't know if the victim was alive or dead. I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I didn't know.
You can be surprised too.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know if she died. If she is dead, was she murdered? Did she die of natural causes? I had no, who did it? If she was murdered, I had no idea. So by the end, you know, when all those answers came out, I was surprised. So I just figured then I've got a much better chance of surprising my reader if I don't know. And I literally don't know. You know, people get like, there's one character in Return to Dyatlov that you don't know if he's a bad guy or a good guy. I didn't know. You know, I think I had it figured out, and then he would switch on me again, and then he would switch again, and then he'd do something else. I'm like, okay, like, I don't know either. So when people ask me like, oh, was that based on someone you know? And I'm like, no.
Annabelle, our guests are here, unfortunately still alive. Is your face on yet?
As I was working on Automatic Age, the basic premise here is that the father and son are trying to survive this horrible robot apocalypse. The androids are coming for them. Every time they turn on a light switch, there's a robot that's like, ooh, somebody's using power. I'm going to go find that person and murder them. So they have to be very careful. And so I would write the scene up to there's no way out. My writing process every day was, I'm going to write until there's no possible way that they could survive. And then I'll stop. And tomorrow I'll try and get them out of it.
Wow.
And so I would just write until like every way out is blocked. Every card, like I would write, this has got to be the end because they're dead for sure. And then I would go away. And the next morning I'd be like, oh, I have a way out. Right? I wouldn't have it there. I'd try to exhaust it all, and then I would have it. And so as a result, and a couple of reviewers and a couple of first readers, I have a number of scenes where the father is certain this is the last time he's going to see his son. And if you were certain this is the last time you were going to see someone you loved and cared for and were trying to protect, you'd try to say something important.
Absolutely.
And so one recent reader was like, F you, Gregory. Every time the dad talks, I'm certain he's not making it through. Right. And I'm like, well, he's not sure either, and neither am I. So I'm giving him a last word with his son. And I think the problem with it for me is that, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but when he no longer has a way out, I was honest with it. I didn't give him one. At the moment when I couldn't figure out a way for them both to make it, I was just like, well, I hoped one of them, I won't tell you which one, but I hoped one of them would make it. I hope they'd both make it to the end. I'm sad to say they didn't.
Oh,
Right. And I couldn't figure it out. There's just no way. That wasn't the Deus Ex Machina vibe of like coming in and rewriting a previous scene or undoing everything I had done that felt so real and honest. And so I just had to say to myself, okay, well, I thought that character was going to make it for the next 3 books in this series. Clearly they are not. Sorry, readers.
no.
We'll see how people say about that. It comes out on the 18th. So
Tomorrow. Or I don't know when this will air. I guess so.
yeah, it's a cruel world. Well, and for the dear listener's sake, for the interest of full disclosure, how JH and I came to know each other, even though we were both in Winnipeg and Winnipeg writers, is that I had kind of been feeling like I didn't want to go to yet another book launch where just the writer is talking about how great they are and then sharing how great they are and then line up and buy their book, please. It was ringing a little hollow to me with everything else going on in the world. And so when I finally, after 2 years, had a chance to launch a new book, The Backbone of Night, I was like, I'd rather just have a conversation about how things happen in writing rather than do this other. So I put on my social media, I asked some people to recommend other talented Winnipeg writers, and your name came up a number of times in a number of circles. And so that is why I reached out. Yes. And because I said specifically, I want someone who can write suspense really well and someone who is not afraid to talk about the process of writing terrible events that happen to characters. And so a number of people brought up JH. And so I reached out and said, co-host the book launch with me. Let's have this conversation. Let's talk about this stuff and we'll make it a little bit more fun. And so that is why we are here today. And I'm just feel like a corner of the writing world in Winnipeg is open to me. So I think that's so cool.
Well, and I think it was a really cool idea you had, and actually made me feel a bit guilty that I'd never thought of that, right? I was one of those writers that's like, look how great I am, although not
I've
really.
done it. I've done it. I'm a glass house full of stones right now, for sure.
But I never would have thought of that. It's a really unique idea to shine a spotlight on another author as well. I think it's a great idea. And I wish, those huge, New York Times bestselling authors, like they should do that. They should totally take somebody out from, who's just like got their book out, indie published maybe, and trying to make it and like shine a spotlight on them. Like, does Stephen King need to sell more books?
Well, right. And I'll tell you that where I got the idea was actually watching Steven Erikson way back. This is going back 15, maybe even 20 years now. He didn't need any help launching his new book, and he invited other authors from Winnipeg to come and co-host the launch with him. And that's how I learned about, an amazing writer, Susie Maloney, who's become a dear friend, and all because it was just like, instead of talking about this book, let's talk about how books are made. Instead of talking about this book, let's talk about how this book fits in with all these other places. And so I just felt like I wanted to recreate that feeling for somebody else,
That's so cool. Yeah, I know Susie as well. She used to have writers retreats in the Catskills. So I went to the first with her.
Emphasis on kills.
Yes, actually very beautiful place though. And that was such a cool experience because almost everybody aside from me and one other fellow were playwrights because her partner is a playwright.
That's right.
And I'll never forget that because they were so collaborative. And maybe it's different in the comic book world, I don't know. But I find with novel writing, it's more, I mean, I have novel writing friends, and that's great. But in general, there's a lot of drama and it's very competitive and it gets very ugly, which I don't like. And you didn't see this at all with the playwrights. Like it was almost like, it was almost like they were dancing in this field full of flowers. Like they were all collaborative and they were all working together and workshopping each other's plays, and they all wanted each other to succeed so badly. And I was just, what the heck is this? This is amazing. Why don't writers, like novelists, do this?
I had a very similar experience working with Andreas Sartison and Rick Chafe and Kristen Jordan on Red Earth. We produced a graphic novel that was a science fiction play. We made a play and then we made a corresponding graphic novel with it. And watching these theater minds just effortlessly break down into component pieces the whole story and then replace with each other, then swap. I'm going to take your dramatic scene and make it my character's dialogue. You take this scene and you make it that over there. And just watching them mix and match was so inspiring to me, and has remained so to this day. I think it's fun. Why do you think novelists have so much drama? Now, I know you don't speak for all novelists.
No.
But what do you think it is about all that?
I wish I knew. I really do wish I knew. I've noticed, I've certainly noticed in the local community, there's a lot of like, ew, like, the literary writers and the poets look down on the genre writers.
The literati, I call them.
Yes, the literati. There's all this, just this really, like, instead of like, oh yeah, that's cool, you're a writer too, it's say, ew, you write that, really? Oh, that'll never get a Governor General's award, that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, you won't sell any books. There's this like this catfight kind of thing. And then in the horror writing community, there's constant drama too, which makes me just want to step far back. Like there's always like someone gets assaulted at a con. I think this happens in sci-fi too, or some writer that you think is amazing, who's wonderful, does something problematic, sends a video he shouldn't have sent to a reviewer, and then the internet, like, it's seriously, I got off Twitter because it seemed like every single day someone else was being canceled in the horror writing community. Like it just got to be too much. It's like, can we just like concentrate on our freaking books and write the damn story? Like, why is it always like, why does someone always have to, sexually assault somebody or sexually harass somebody or, say something evil? And then it just, and there's all these egos that just, these egos that need to be stroked constantly, or they get upset and they start canceling people. And it just like, what the hell? We're all writers. Like this is, and we're all adults, presumably, right?
Presumably. Yeah, presumably.
So, I don't understand it, but my response, for better or for worse, is just to check myself out.
But it was in there. A woman's head.
Nora, I think you're a little upset. Would you care for a sedative?
Get out!
I'm sure you're familiar with Andrew Davidson, who wrote The Gargoyle.
Mm-hmm.
What I love so much about Andrew Davidson is no one had heard of him. He wasn't part of the literati. He wasn't part of the community. He wasn't going to, he wasn't a presenter at the festivals. He wasn't, somebody who everyone was going, oh, you really must talk to Andrew Davidson for that mentorship. Like there was none of that. And then boom, out of nowhere, he gets $1 million book deal, and boom, out of nowhere, he gets $1 million movie deal. And I'm like, yes, because he was almost proving that you don't need all that stuff. You don't need all these people to like pat you on the back and say you're good to be good. And I love that about him.
You put your finger on it right there. I think that many people, everyone has a different kind of wound that has driven them in some direction, right? We run toward pleasure and we run away from pain. But I think that one thing that maybe typifies writers in general, people who really want the craft to be recognized as something they are a part of, have been told they're no good for a long time, have been told there's no money in it, there's no reason to do it. Why would you waste your time on that? They've been told so. And so the ego gets caught up in needing to prove and needing to be seen and needing to be recognized. And so sometimes you push others down so you can feel seen. You haven't actually risen up. You're just pushing other people down. And people saw you for a short time, and so it felt to you like you rose. And then there are people, like you say, who go away and write a brilliant book like The Gargoyle, and oh, it was only the work that mattered after all.
Yes, but I've heard people say, and no shade to Andrew, I love Andrew, but I've heard people in the literati say, oh, it was just a marketing scheme. His book just did well because, they decided to push that marketing. It's like, have you read it? Or some of the criticisms I've read of it, it's like where they'll talk about the language or whatever and say it's not literary. It's like, that was the character speaking, not Andrew speaking. Like, are you an idiot? Like, did you not read?
It was said to me just recently that a very good marketing will make a poor product fail faster. It won't actually make it better because it gets the poor thing into people's hands faster, and then word of mouth will kill the thing. And so if you have good marketing plus good product, then it gets into people's hands, and then they become that second wave. So anyone who thinks, oh, it's just if they put some marketing dollars into it, is forgetting that once people read it, they also have to tell 20 friends.
Exactly. Right? And I'm sorry, but people tattoo words from that book on them. And the only other person I've seen that done to is Stephen King's Dark Tower. People, have used the
Elven script. I mean, I go to Comic-Con, so I see Elven script tattoos from J.R.R. Tolkien nonstop.
Oh, there you go. Right. But the fact that people love that book enough that they will tattoo it permanently on themselves, to me, that says more than, almost anything else. People loved that book. And hopefully I'm not telling tales of school, but his experience of actually writing versus being a writer, like in the public eye and all that, were so radically different. He doesn't want anything to do with that part of it again.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I've said many times on this podcast and many times in public, and I apologize, dear listener, for saying it yet again, but publishing is a byproduct of writing. It's not why you should seek to write, right? Writing is self-archaeology, and you want to look in a little bit and see what's there and then put it on the page. And if it helps you, great. And if it's entertaining, great, share it. But do it every day, and you'll be better for it, even if no one has ever heard of you.
Absolutely. And if no one's ever heard of you, it doesn't become a job. It doesn't become tedious with deadlines. It doesn't become, you're not faced with disillusionment. Because I know when I was starting out, I had the dream, right? You get a big agent, they sell you to a big publisher, you make millions of dollars, you do this for the rest of your life. And I've had to fire 2 agents now. I've had horrible experiences with New York agents. They're supposed to be like, that's the creme de la creme, right? You get an agent in New York City, whoo, you're done. I was in a writing group that I actually helped start, and I got kicked out of it when I got an agent because they said, oh, well, you don't need us anymore. You need to find
that's so awful.
Your level. I got an agent. I got someone that maybe presumably could sell my book.
Yeah, maybe. Presumably, these are the 2 key things.
Yeah. I wasn't going around going like, look at me, I'm so hot, I've got an agent. It was like, it's the first step. Or as it turned out, no step or a step backwards, but I think there's like what you were talking about, that people need to push themselves down. It's almost like everybody thinks there's this tiny little piece of success.
You're
and
right.
If someone else gets any of it, then there's none left for them. So like, let's just trash the heck out of them, or let's, do everything we can to like push them down so that, there's more left for us. But it doesn't work that way. I think whenever I've heard of a book blow up where people are like, oh, like Twilight or Shades of Grey, I'm like, that's awesome. If millions of people are reading Harry Potter, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, they're reading.
Yeah,
that's what we want. There's way more chance that someone who loves a book is going to read yours than there is with people not reading are going to start reading. So it's like, I've never taken that as, oh, just because Twilight did really well, no one can ever write about vampires again. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't see it.
JH, I think of it like this. love is fickle, but I also believe it to be infinite. So while it is true that the crowd will wane and wax and it'll shine its light, if somebody else is succeeding, it can be divided infinitely. That love, there's room in the heart. Like, look at this room I'm in. It is full of my love for books, right? And I don't love one, well, okay, in some cases I love one more than another. But the truth is I got them all, right? And so the readers out there are the same. If it's real, if there are tears for the writer, and if there's fears for the writer, there will be for the reader too, and they'll come. And it ain't easy. JH, I have very much enjoyed our conversation. I'm so glad to have gotten to know you a little bit, and I hope we will have many more conversations like this. But sadly, we have come to the end. Thank you for coming. This has been Super Pulp Science. This is Gregory Kamichuk encouraging you to join the fight, write your stories, and as always, make comments.